Good evening. I'm Nancy Scott, President of the League of Women Voters of Northern Nevada, and I would like to welcome you all who are here in the audience. Thanks for coming, and also for the people who are watching on YouTube. Before we begin, I'd like you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance Thank you. We're very proud to host this first of the 2022 election forums, along with our partners, AAUW and Sierra Nevada Forums. And these forums would not be possible without our other sponsors, the Nevada Appeal and the Brewery Arts Center. And we sincerely thank the candidates and the representatives for the ballot questions for being here tonight to answer questions and inform our community. The League of Women Voters was started in 1920 as a nonpartisan political action network in order to inform citizens about government and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. We still have that same long tradition, and we are famous for our thorough research and study on our issues related to health care, equity, government, and environmental stewardship, as well as forums like this one featuring candidates for elected office and issues that are of critical importance to our community. The League of Women Voters' overarching goal is making democracy work. There is nothing more important to this goal than having informed voters. That is the purpose of this forum. Misinformation and disinformation may be presented as fact during tonight's discussions. It is up to each of you to sort out fact from misinformation. Tonight's forum is divided into two sections. First, we have the candidates for Congressional District 2. We have candidate Amodei and candidate Krause. And the format is as follows. Each candidate will give a 2-minute opening statement, followed by the question and answer segment. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question with 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Each candidate will be allotted 1 minute for their closing statement. We have volunteers stationed up in the aisles who will collect questions from the audience on index cards. Please write 1 question per index card and address your questions to all the candidates or whichever ballot question. The volunteers will collect the cards and screen them to avoid duplication down here. Please note, due to time constraints, the moderator will not be able to read every question, and they may not be read as you wrote them. It may be a subject that was already covered. We very much appreciate having a live audience, as it helps us achieve our goal of promoting an informed electorate. And in the interest of adhering to our tight schedule, we ask you to refrain from applause until the end. And our moderator for this evening is Silvia Villanueva. Please welcome her.
Good evening, my name is Silvia Villanueva, and I'd like to welcome the candidates for Congressional District 2, Mr. Mark Amodei and Miss Elizabeth Mercedes Krause. The candidates have agreed that Mr. Amodei will go first this evening, but before we begin, we'd like to allow the candidates each an opportunity for a 2-minute opening statement. Miss Krause will allow you to go first for the opening statement, and then Mr. Amodei will begin with the questions.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay? Hello? All right. My name is Mercedes Krause, and I'm running for Congress to return this seat to the public trust of the people of Nevada's 2nd Congressional District. This campaign is deeply rooted in my values as a mother, auntie, Oglala Lakota citizen, and a born and raised Nevadan. I was lucky enough to grow up in a home where my small business owning mother and union working father taught me that sharing values means more than sharing a political party. These lessons shaped my views on bipartisanship and showed me that community work naturally includes everyone. I brought this perspective to the roles that I've held as a commissioner with the Nevada Minority Affairs Commission, as a board member for the AAUW and the Nevada State Education Association, during my appointment to the Superintendent's Advisory Cabinet for the Nevada Department of Education, and in my service as the chair of the Nevada Native Caucus. It's been my honor to work in committees throughout northern Nevada for the better part of 10 years. And time after time, I've heard stories from our neighbors who are tired of those constantly voting against us. There have been so many opportunities to bring millions of dollars to our district funding that would improve our education system, the quality of life for our elders, children and working people, rural health care access, protection for farmers and other business owners, and industries most affected by climate change. Just yesterday, I heard from community leaders in a Foreman Truckee who are actually struggling to find money to put crosswalks in their neighborhoods. In Washoe County, I met a woman not much older than me who was caring for her aged mother, and because her mother's Social Security check was $900 and her medicine was $800, she was heavily reliant on her daughter. And more than a few conversations I've been invited to by tribal communities, I've seen the disappointment and hurt on the faces of elders and young people.
I apologize, but that's time for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Begin.
Thank you, ma'am. First of all, I want to thank the League and the Association of University Women for doing this. As I was walking in, I was lamenting the fact that I've been participating in these in one form or another since they used to be in the Board of Supervisors room at the community college, but I am not Social Security eligible, so nobody jump to any conclusions, but close. You know, it's been a pretty interesting time for these last 11 years that I've been doing this as Nevada's advocate in the House of Representatives. There are always needs, there are always contentiousness, and it seems like the contentiousness sweepstakes are even higher in the last few years than they've been before, and not that it was ever calm. So I think it's important as you're deciding who you want to be your representative for the next 24 months in the 118th Congress, who do we want that we think can, A, focus on the issues instead of the talking points? Who do we want that can work with people to solve problems and get the policy right, as opposed to engage in the TV wars like I see many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle doing every night? And frankly, that doesn't accomplish much. If we've done anything, it's the three parts of the job, which are this: constituent services, oversight of federal agencies, and then voting on the issues. So we've tried to concentrate on all three of those and provide good, strong results with that. Maybe you know somebody who's dealt with our office in terms of helping them with a Social Security issue, helping them with a VA issue, or, as everybody knows, it's like how you voted on this or that. And when we had a discussion about that in depth, to at least have had a discussion about here are the facts that influenced me, not hey, this is what the conference talking points were, and so that's what I went with. So I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with my opponent, and congratulations on your primary win. And we look forward to the evening.
Thank you, Mr. Amodei. Now, at this time, we will be moving forward to questions, and based on what was agreed earlier, we will be starting with Mr. Amodei. This is a two-part question. Do you accept the results of the 2020 presidential election as legitimate? And what measures do you believe are necessary to ensure fair, accurate elections and equal voting access?
The answer to the first question is yes. The second part is this. In Nevada, all of you that have been voting here over the last few cycles or whatever, I'll just take the primary as one. You go in. We used to do it, well, we still do it, by signature. And so I got to tell you, as a guy who signed up to vote when I was 18, you went down, it was downstairs in over here, about 2 blocks east of here, you'd sign up, and when you'd go in to vote, they'd have a book with your signature in it. And so you'd sign in, and they'd compare it to what you did when you were 18. And so I got to tell you, I'm a little nervous these days when you sit there and go, Jesus, my signature's changed a little bit in a few years. And so now they're doing it electronically, and I get all that. And by the way, I think the clerks in Nevada are doing a pretty good job, at least in CD2. Mistakes are made now and then, but I don't ascribe to all the stuff where it's like, listen, Donald Trump left the 15 rural Nevada counties with a 75,000 vote lead. And your first question, which is, do you support the results? It's like, I was elected. It's kind of hard when the ballot says President of the United States Representative, to go, oh, that was all. You're like, well, what about the results in your election? Absolutely, yes. But I do think it is not unreasonable in this day and age. You want to vote by mail? That's fine. We've had that before. It's called absentee voting. But I do think we need to strengthen the stuff on the ID beyond signatures that are, in my case, decades old, and machines which even the Clark County people will tell you the reliability factor was not high in terms of reading that, much as you do when you go to the store these days and sign for a charge card. Stronger voter ID, yes. The election, I liked it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Krause, if you'd like me to repeat the question, please let me know. Otherwise,
No, I understand the question. Yes, I agree that it was a fair election. The results are to be trusted. I think one of the greater threats to our voting is denial of voter access or limiting voter access. So in turn, we need to make sure that we are striving to allow, people in rural areas and tribal communities to have access. Also, voter education for communities that have been historically disenfranchised. So, yes, I believe that the election results were accurate, and again, I think we need to push for greater voter access so that all eligible voters are able to make their voice heard.
thank you. And for question number 2, we will begin with you, Ms. Krause. This is also a 2-part question. What do you perceive to be the greatest threats to America's democracy, and what action should Congress take to counterbalance these threats?
I think I'll bring that one back to access to voting and making sure that all voters feel that their vote matters. Unfortunately, historically, certain demographics have had limited access to voting, and then community pressures, even when there was legal access to voting. We're still having some issues with tribal communities. We know that legislation was passed that allows for early access voting and same-day voting, and there's still some pushback that's coming through. So I believe that, making sure that everyone has access, ease of access to voting, and that they understand the importance of their vote. To me, I think that's one of the most important things to look at.
Thank you, Ms. Krause. And Mr. Amodei, if you'd like me to repeat the question, please let me know.
Could you do that just, please?
Sure. It's a 2-part question. What do you perceive to be the greatest threats to America's democracy, and what action should Congress take to counterbalance these threats?
Well, I think for the first part, that I'll give you a 2-part answer. One is money, and the second one is social media. How's that for starting out with nice, easy stuff? I think in the Senate race in Nevada this time, I remember not that long ago when Harry Reid and Sharon Angle ran, and hearing somebody go, oh my God, Harry Reid's going to spend $26 million, and Sharon Angle's going to spend $22 million for a Nevada Senate race. Now fast forward to this one, and the predictions are that the Cortez-Mosto-Laxalt race is going to be like $200 million. Do the math on that for how much that is for every voter in Nevada, and it's not a good thing. The second part of that is, and it's interesting that President Scott alluded to this in her opening, where it's like, hey, you may hear whatever you hear, it's up to you to figure out what's what's afoot and what's horseback and who's telling the truth and who's fibbing. My frustration with social media is this. We regulate TV. We regulate what you say over the phone. We regulate what you send through the mail. There are rules about all that. But it almost seems like the social media, regardless of what side you like or on, the rules are, there are no rules. And so you've got stuff floating around there, not just in politics, but in other areas where it's become the most prevalent medium of communication, and it has almost no rules that they have to abide by. And that scares the heck out of me in terms of, you got to be a really good discerner of information and how you consume information, not only politically, but everything else. It's the Wild West out there. So those are mine. And by the way, Congress should play a role in the social media. I don't know if they'll ever regulate themselves on money, but they should play a role. They played it in every other medium of communication.
Thank you. And I just realized, I apologize, I forgot to allow for rebuttals. So we will do that moving forward, so excuse me. Did you want to rebuttal?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay, thank you. Moving forward, we will perform in that way. And Mr. Amodei,
Yes, ma'am.
we will begin question 3 with you. The recently passed Inflation Reduction Act includes provisions on reducing the federal deficit, combating the climate crisis, and lowering health care costs. What do you believe this legislation accomplishes, and what revisions would you recommend?
Well, I voted against the Inflation Reduction Act because I thought that it had more to do with talking points than it had to do with actually identifying the sources of why we are experiencing inflation. And I think it pretty much ignored it all. The other reason that I voted against it is because, quite frankly, Chuck Schumer and Joe Manchin got together and did a deal behind closed doors in the Senate, and it was on the House in like 48 hours. That's not the legislative process. Even if you don't like the bill, that process where you hear from all sides, get to take a look at amendments. By the way, no amendments allowed from the minority side. And you're sitting there going, here it is. You want it bad, you get it bad. And so I thought that the Inflation Reduction Act did nothing to talk about how we go forward with our energy policy responsibly instead of agenda-wise. And it did nothing to deal with supply chains in a meaningful sense and things that all end up being kitchen table items. And so, don't have much good to say about it.
Thank you. Thank you. And Ms. Krause, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. The recently passed Inflation Reduction Act includes provisions on reducing the federal deficit, combating the climate crisis, and lowering health care costs. What do you believe this legislation accomplishes, and what revisions would you recommend?
I think it accomplishes recognizing the situation that everyday Nevadans are facing. One of the things that I have in my platform is dignity, and to me, that dignity means having a space for happiness. If we don't have, we don't have living wages, most people here, all around the country. We don't have affordable housing, access to health care, mental health care services. So, things like this Inflation Reduction Act that help us. Also, things like a cap on prescription drugs that everyday Nevadans need. And also, we have a vote that came to the House that was for the Price Gouging Reduction Act at our gas, for our gas. And, these have been voted against, just like the Inflation Reduction Act. And when I'm in Congress, I would like to ensure that we get the funding that we need, that we're eligible for, to help struggling Nevadans, and, vote in alignment with the needs of Nevadans. I told a story in my opening about the woman who was caring for her mother and, the struggles. I mean, we all know them. I have so many stories that I could share from my classroom of families sharing housing, students not able to learn because of the living conditions that they have. So I think we do need to work together. We need to make sure that we're pushing for, for bills that are supporting, again, everyday Nevadans and making our lives easier every day.
Thank you. And I will allow for rebuttal for 1 minute. Mr. Amodei, will you move up? Okay, but
No,
just for the future, move up to the mic because we're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so Ms. Krause, we will begin question 4 with you. The effects of climate change are already evident in Nevada with huge wildfires, drought, and extreme heat. What policies or legislation would you support to help minimize America's CO2 emissions, and how would you help our communities adapt to climate change?
I live with, the fears for the future that climate change is creating in our youth. I hear it on the campaign trail, and I hear it in my own home. I have adult daughters who, 2 out of 3 of them are talking about not having children because they're so afraid of the future. I think we have to take drastic action. We have to listen to what scientists are saying and follow, the leaders in this area with the information that they have so that, before it is too late, before these terrible things that our youth are afraid of actually do happen. There's another act that out in my outreach to tribal communities has been brought to my attention. That was the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, which was co-sponsored for and actually voted against. This was a movement that the tribal communities and all of our community were really looking to, for conservation and restoration of wildlife and plants. And also, when we're looking at things like the expansion of the Air Force Base and different, mining projects. All of these things are related to our climate and the environment. We need to make sure that we are including everyone in the conversation, especially the communities, such as tribal communities, who are being affected. One of the things, as I mentioned, I'm the chair of our statewide Native American caucus. We're pushing for what the United Nations has in their Indigenous Peoples Declaration of Rights, and that is the push for consent rather than the consultation that's been happening. So for emissions, for industry that is harming our earth and protection of our wildlife and plants, we need to take action in Congress to protect them.
Thank you. And Mr. Amodei?
Thank you. Climate change is another one of those issues where it seems like a lot of the discussion is either all to one side or all to the other, instead of going, okay, things are changing. Why are they changing? Carbon footprints are some of that, obviously. But in that discussion, when you ignore the fact that we have made some progress, nobody's declaring victory, mission accomplished, any of that. But when you talk about what you do and you talk about providing for families in Nevada or certain industries, it's amazing to sit there and go, okay, we want no tailpipes on cars, and some states have even said by a certain date, we want to go full bore for that. Well, right now, the technology is lithium. In this state, we have a few lithium sites, and so the administration says, we support this EV issue, all that's, we want to go, we want to go, we want to go. See how much fun those folks are having. Not that they deserve a free pass on NEPA, but NEPA's been working for years if you actually don't try to weaponize it one way or the other. And so you're sitting there going, we need lithium, but by the way, good luck getting those extraction operations, some people use the M word, mines, and call them that, but you're still sitting there going, if we're going to pursue this, and responsibly, we need some materials. Copper is another one. If you're going to build a carbon-free industrial base, you're going to need some materials to do it with before you even get to that. So climate change is one of those things where nobody's for dirty water, nobody's for dirty air, nobody's for contaminated soil, but we got to get focused on the issues as opposed to the politics and say, we're going to cut you all off right now, no matter what the pain is, or as soon as possible, and we're going to go to war because there are some fossil fuels that can be used responsibly.
Thank you. And Ms. Krause, would you like a 1-minute rebuttal?
I'd just like to say, there is such urgency, and, people are very serious and emphatic and stressed when they're talking about climate protections and on this topic. It's not because of politics. It's because of the limited time that we have to correct these things before it's too late.
Thank you. And for question number 5, we will begin with Mr. Amodei. Would you support federal legislation that limits reproductive rights? And please explain your position.
No, I wouldn't, because the Dobbs decision that is best left with the states. And by the way, Nevadans over 30 years ago dealt with those decisions as a state and said, you can have an abortion for any reason you want for the first 2 trimesters. For the last trimester, you got to fit into some exceptions, life of the mother, other things like that. Guess what? You can't sit here and ask people to vote for you to represent them and then turn around and say, oh, but I disrespect the fact when you folks all went to the polls in 1990 and said, these are what we want the rules to be in Nevada. And so, what did Dobbs do to change that? Nothing. Nothing has changed in Nevada. It's still the same as it was before. And so, and let's get it right up front. Lindsey Graham says, oh no, now that we don't want what Nancy Pelosi's suggested one was in the Women's Reproductive Act, or whatever it's called, HR 38, whatever. And Lindsey Graham says, yeah, now we want one that establishes a federal limit. It's like, that's not being consistent in terms of either with the Dobbs decision or respecting the people in those states that have done it by initiative petition. Oh, and by the way, you know what else you did? You said if you want to change it, you got to come back to the voters. That's a good thing to support. That's it.
Thank you. And Ms. Krause?
I want to just clearly state first, I am a pro-choice candidate. I am the mother of 3 daughters, and I'm a woman who's grateful that I had the opportunity to choose how and when I started my family. It is not okay. The government should not be there, when we're at our doctor's appointments. These are completely separate. There should be no crossover in this. And, as you said, Nevada voters have made it clear that this is true. And I am a little tired, though, when I hear the state argument. Well, it's protected in our state. We watched our rights taken away by the Supreme Court. It was traumatizing to women all over the country, women here in Nevada. And I do, respectfully want to ask about your voting record on this issue. I know you say that you support that, but your voting record shows that you voted against our choice and also the choice of our right to contraceptives. So sure. That was something that I did not understand, and it doesn't really go along with what you said just now.
Thank you. We will allow it if it'll use your time.
It's a rebuttal, right?
If you'd like to use this as your rebuttal.
That's fine. But we'll keep it clean. First of all, I voted against the Nancy Pelosi bill because, quite frankly, it said you can have abortion on demand. And I don't support that. You got 6 months to figure it out. If there's other stuff you do too. And if you say no, it's all about just the mom up until the week before the due date. If you're looking for somebody who supports that, you're absolutely right. I'm not that guy. And then when you talked about contraception, contraception is codified in Nevada. Nevada revised statutes. It's codified. There's not a problem with contraception in Nevada. And the reason I voted against that bill was it was 24 hours from when it was introduced to when it was voted on the floor. Does that sound like the legislative process to any of you people? Maybe it does. But I'll just tell you this. No hearings, no nothing. Here we go. Political messaging bill so that you can go out in the talking points and say, oh, these people are homophobes. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Nevadans have not had a problem getting contraception because we've protected that in state law.
Thank you. And we are moving on to question 6. We will begin with Ms. Krause. What do you believe are the best policies to ensure students and teachers are safe from active shooters?
Well, I think the first thing there is making sure that we have mental health regulations in place, that we do not have easy access to, high-powered weapons. We've seen in all of these tragic events that happen, the same weapons are used. And I mean, if there is, another instrument out there that was harming people at the same rate, there are regulations on those things. There's no reason not to have regulations on these high-powered killing weapons that are terrorizing, not just in communities that it's actually happening, in communities all over. In my classroom in Nevada, I had to have a plan where I hid things in my classroom so I can protect my students. So that's number one. Also making sure that there is a rapid response and plan in the communities for the schools so that school leaders are able to get emergency services when they need. Also, very important, and I will mention another bill. There was a bill that just was on the floor for mental health services in schools, which I know I've heard you agree that we really do need that, but you voted against those last week. I mean, that is, we need to make sure that we have those services in schools, and also the overcrowding itself. When a teacher has so many students in their classroom, it's not possible to have that connection with their students so that you can see when they're having that trouble. And when we don't catch this at an early age, because of these lack of resources, the problem just compounds as the students get older.
Thank you. And Mr. Amodei.
Thank you. First of all, if schools are going to become targets, and I hate to say this because it's no fun to go to the airport, we need to, part of the solution, not at all, we need to start treating them like they need to be more hardened. If that means fences and gates and restricting access like in an airport, then we need to do that. There have been some small steps made in that regard. But here are just a few of the things, since we're talking about legislation. Stop School Violence Act provided $75 million in grants to states, local governments, and Indian tribes to improve school security, including placement and use of metal detectors. Fix NICS Act requires federal agencies and states to produce NICS implementation plans focused on uploading all information on the background check system showing that a person is prohibited from purchasing and possessing firearms under current law. The 21st Century Cures Act, funding for law enforcement, de-escalation training to help individuals with mental health issues, funding for suicide prevention, intervention, and then Restoring Hope for Mental Health and Well-Being Act, bipartisan bill, which provided grants to school districts in order to help them deal with this. Technology is the third piece. Since the internet is kind of the open and free whatever, we have the technology to monitor that. How many times have we heard that they were telegraphing what they were thinking about doing on the internet? And it was like, yeah, but, that's kind of out there. We have the ability to start monitoring that, and this might be a good area to try to test that on. So there's three different areas generally where I think we can go. I didn't vote for the last one because, quite frankly, it had a whole bunch of stuff that empowered people to basically affect people's constitutional rights under the guise of administration. And it's like, hey, you get some due process before you get, your rights taken away. So, once again, a bill that there was no input asked for from the other side. Just here we go. We know we got the 218 votes. The rest of you guys get lost.
Thank you. And Ms. Krause, would you like to rebut that?
Yeah, I would like to ask what were some of those things, because that one I thought was a no-brainer, a vote, that everyone, no matter what side of the aisle could agree on. I know you mentioned there were some things. Do you think you could share those with us?
Can I?
Ms. Krause, it's not a debate, it's a forum, so we'll just leave it at that, your rebuttal. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so the next question, we will begin with Mr. Amodei. What specific policies would you endorse for immigration reform?
Well, let's see. The Supreme Court just came out on the docket thing. We still have 500,000 plus people that need to be dealt with, regardless of their decision. I am a guy who signed discharge petitions over my time in Congress and sponsored bills that tried to solve the problem instead of demagoguing it. And make no mistake, it's my humble opinion, both sides demagogue the heck out of it. Democrats say the Republicans hate you and want to send you home in the middle of the night. And the Republicans say, kowtowing to some of the folks in the media, we want to round you all up. Neither one of those is realistic or, in fact, truthful. So here's what you do. Let's start with the DACA folks. Most of those folks are not even juveniles anymore and not even close to it. So you say, listen, if you've been here and you're not a juvenile justice all-star or an adult justice all-star, you've been working, some of them are in the military, by the way. Wouldn't that be a nasty picture? Thank you for your service, and we're here to take you away. And so you say, if you've been here and playing by the rules for the most part, here's what you have to do to get to the point where you get a green card. And once you get a green card, if you want to apply for citizenship, you go down and apply like everybody else and go through the process, background checks, all that stuff. There you go. I think that would be a good first step because it's a smaller group. Then we go to the bigger groups. But the other thing you got to do, though, when you talk about immigration reform is the people that have entered without interview or overstayed their visa need to be segregated. If you're a criminal justice all-star or something like that, then guess what? You can't stay. So you give them, say, 90 days. You got to come in and sign up. If you don't come in and sign up and you get caught, then you are going back. But you go through the background stuff and go through that process, get your green card, don't get in front of anybody else, and then that can work instead of Congress continuing to do nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Amodei.
And being in trouble.
Ms. Krause, would you like me to repeat the question?
No,
Okay, thank
I
you.
just will say it does strike my heart, to be honest, a little bit to hear that reference of criminal justice all-stars, because, I mean, that would be the minority. The vast majority of the people who are coming over are hardworking, good people looking for a better life, just like, you know, the immigrants who came to this country before them. I think DACA is a great way, a great path for this. And another thing, again, reframing, it's really striking that we see, you know, when we have tragedies like that happen in Ukraine and other parts of the world, you know, some people are looked at as, you know, refugees who need that help, and then other people are demonized. And, you know, like I said, you know, that term criminal all-stars, or, you know, some of the other terms that we heard our former president used. This is a gross mischaracterization of people who are hardworking, good people. So again, for policy, I think DACA is a great start. And, you know, starting out with offering those green cards to the hardworking people who are here already.
Thank you. And would you like a rebuttal?
Well, I would just say this: earning your status is a positive thing, and I don't dispute that the vast majority of people are law-abiding people. But there's also bad people, and the example was on the Strip in Las Vegas yesterday, who were people who came in an open border sense and basically did some bad things to some people. And so you've got to have something at the border that meaningfully screens people who are attempting to come in. And the fact that that happened, while it may be the vast minority of it, still happened, and it's no less significant for the people that were on that sidewalk in front of the wind.
Thank you. And at this time, we have to move to questions from the audience. So, Ms. Krause, we will begin with you. Mm-hmm. Do you think the federal government is doing enough to make affordable housing available? And what do you see as a federal role?
No, I don't think so. I think that we do need federal involvement in limiting, I'll be very honest, limiting out-of-state and foreign investors and commercial investors who are coming into communities and buying places up, and then the people who've been in the communities forever are not able to, if they're renters, they're not able to afford to maintain the rent that they have, and then if they have hopes of buying, they're not able to because this has happened. Also, one of the things that I would like to see that does have to do with housing, and it is also an education crossover, is in rural and tribal communities having, some support for teacher housing so that we can make sure that we have high-quality educators in those communities. So this could be, applied to other areas such as healthcare, that we need to get more people into our state. My other thought on that for healthcare was having tax credits and things. I have a teacher frame of view, so I was thinking for teachers who, and other people who have, less salary than other professionals or are struggling, some sort of tax credit could be used in order to support home purchasing or even rentals to help keep up so that we don't end up with professionals who are unhoused and all of these other struggles. Like one of the stories I share, is families with 5 people sleeping in one room, or kids, piled together in a room sleeping on the floor. So I think we can all agree this is a very important issue, and there are definitely things that across all levels of government can be done to help with this problem.
Thank you. And Mr. Amodei?
Well, there's a lot of moving parts in that in terms of what's your income, what area of the state or even the city and sometimes are you in, all those different sorts of things. But the simple answer, since this is a federal forum, is every city, town, and unincorporated city in the state is surrounded completely by federal land. And so when you start talking about affordability of housing, if that's what you're going to focus on, the ability to transfer land surrounding, whether it's in the Truckee Meadows, whether it's in Las Vegas, whether it's in Ely or wherever, in federal lands bills, to transfer that to the planning and zoning authorities for use as low-income housing is there. Just got to do it. But kind of a funny thing about those bills is if you introduce one, then the folks at the city council or the county commission show up and say, we don't want it, then guess what? You don't get it. But I would think they would want it. That's not the whole problem solved, but it's a big first step if you have the real estate. Because if you don't, then what you start getting, which is not reflective of at least this part of Nevada, is you get people going vertical. And so that'd be something where I think the federal government can do much more in collaboration with the local governments.
Thank you. And let me see if we're allowing rebuttals. Are we allowing rebuttals on the audience questions? Would you like to rebut?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. The second question, we will begin with Mr. Amodei. What do you think of Medicare for all as a solution to exorbitant cost and poor quality care in the U.S.?
Not much of it. I don't think much of it. That's single payer, at least in the proposals we've seen from the Obama administration forward. And quite frankly, when it's single payer, then there is no competition and you have no choice. And while I know there's a lot of people who go, my God, single payer is the answer, every place you've looked around the world that's tried it has not been an unmitigated success story. There'd be a lot more of it. And then you get with the stories that there are people from other countries, specifically the one to the north, saying we want to come to your thing because we have single payer in Canada and we like what you've got going on down there. Now, do we need to keep an eye on insurance companies and make sure that's as competitive as possible? And in Nevada, where we were a couple of years ago, where nobody wanted to write health insurance, and that's when the state exchange got started, it's a little better now. And I'm not here to defend insurance companies or pharma for a minute, but if you make it all a federal government program, so it's kind of like everybody's on a different flavor of the VA thing, I just think that's a big, big step that is not going to provide the quality that we're looking for ultimately in our healthcare system.
Okay, and Ms. Krause?
I know from personal experience with others, like friends, even family members who are dual citizens, they would literally buy a plane ticket. It was better for them to buy a plane ticket, fly to the country of their dual citizenship, receive their care, stay there until they healed, and then come back. I do believe that is a viable system. I also have a couple of other things that I do want to add to it. I think it's very important to have it. I can give a personal example right now. I'm not teaching this year. I have 3 adult daughters. One was eligible for Medicaid. I have another one. She works and goes to school. She literally only works 1 day a week at a preschool, and she's not eligible for Medicaid as it is. So this is really important that we do expand it. But I think another thing that's important, for people who strongly believe, I'm a union member and I'm a union endorsed person. So if people feel so strongly and they do have insurance that they are good with, they should be allowed to keep it. And also, I think a really important thing to do would be to have a standardized pricing that for doctors, because what happens, they don't accept different insurance because different insurance pays at different prices. So I think that that's a different, or another way that would really help us make sure that we have health care for all Nevadans.
Mr. Amodei, would you like to rebut?
Just one other point, and Mercedes brought it up. We have a doctor shortage in the country, and sure as heck is in Nevada. So one of your challenges, if you start saying, there's one insurance company, it's Medicare, and that's what you're going to do, try getting in when the shortage gets even more acute, if that's in fact what happens. And I also appreciate, listen, a lot of the union healthcare plans are great plans, and you should want to keep them because they're great plans. But I think just putting everybody under one umbrella is not going to result in better care for people, and it's also going to exacerbate the healthcare professional shortage.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next and last question. Due to time restrictions, Ms. Krause, we'll begin with you. Do you agree with some legislators who want to see Social Security phased out?
Absolutely not. I have a father who is on Social Security. I know that so many of the voters, that's been one of the top concerns when I spoke to them. Definitely not. I am for an expansion of Social Security and also Medicare. That's a very simple answer. Those are definite.
Thank you. And Mr. Amodei.
Well, it's public record anyhow, so as a guy who's 64, I don't think it's a good time to phase Social Security out. How's that for? But I just, it's kind of like the way the healthcare's gone the whole time. I don't want to break anything while I'm here. The way the healthcare's gone the whole time, it's like, yeah, do we need to evolve and based on how things change? With anything, you need to do that. You need to do that with energy. You need to do that with healthcare. You need to do that with Social Security. But to say, okay, that's no longer it, and here you are, you're in charge or whatever, especially, anybody watch what's going on for all those financial gurus the last week or so? God help you if you're managing your own, unless you're one of those geniuses that knows stuff before it happens. So I don't think getting rid of Social Security, especially when you've got, there are some reforms where you could talk about a means test, that sort of thing. But I think getting rid of Social Security is a bad idea, especially in the financial reality that people are facing today.
Ms. Krause, did you want to rebut that?
Are you interested in an expansion with the cost of living?
Ms. Krause, I don't, would you like to rebut that?
No, I'm good. I was wondering.
And I do have a question for the two of you. We can answer more, but it's if you would like to. I don't want you to feel any pressure to do that under the time. We have time, but it's if you would like to. Otherwise, we can move on to closing statements. You can.
A couple more?
Sure. You would do two more? Okay. So I believe I left off with Ms. Krause. Okay. So Mr. Amodei, we will begin with you. What legislation is necessary, if any, to improve the criminal justice system to ensure equal justice under the law?
That's a pretty narrow one. Well, listen, we've been to, in the time I've been around, we've been at one where it's like, we want judges to have complete discretion and we want them to have no discretion. Like a lot of issues, it's somewhere in the middle, and mandatory sentencing guidelines, even as as a conservative guy and a former federal prosecutor, is like, the challenge is having a system and you make it work that lets people do what's appropriate in the circumstances. And you've got a great example of that recently. Although I don't know anybody who has a marijuana possession offense that got prosecuted federally. You really have to distinguish yourself as a special person to do that for simple possession and get the U.S. Attorney's attention. But having said that, I think it's all the above approach. It's like, what does it cost to keep somebody in prison? There's certain types of prisons. There's work programs. There's halfway houses. There's all that, and to mold all that together to where it's not exorbitantly expensive, but at the same time, those people that very richly deserve to be removed from society in a significant way get what they get too, has always been the challenge with that. And when you try to do legislatively and at the federal level, where you got 535 people from 50 states and a few territories, that's an incredibly tough committee to get anybody to agree on, because every place is different. Bottom line, the states need to play the major role.
Thank you. Ms. Krause.
All right. Actually, can you repeat the
Sure,
question?
yes. What legislation is necessary, if any, to improve the criminal justice system to ensure equal justice under the law?
Okay. The first note that I made on that that came to mind is making sure that we do not have for-profit criminal justice system or places that people are going where it creates a benefit to incarcerate people. Also, it comes back to education, talking about the cost of things. Right now, we have an F rating for our children in school readiness, so this is before they even go to school, and we have an F rating in our school funding. So, this is not just, one level of our government, it's all three, and we need to be working together and ensuring that we have all the funding that we can so that we can educate our children so that they don't move into this path. It costs more to incarcerate someone than to educate someone. We all know that. And then also, from what I know, from what I've seen, so many of the people who are incarcerated, it has to do with mental health problems. Again, if we can have more mental health services before, during, so that, people are actually able to, learn something from their time that they're there and come out and not have the same problems again. And then also, the after. So, the funding, it's not just the brick and mortar, the prisons, and we know the staffing because of the cost or the wages, the low wages that they pay the staff. That's another problem. I should have added that one to my list. But again, I'll just say, we have to make sure that our prisons are not a for-profit system where someone is benefiting from people being incarcerated. We need to really shift that focus to education and mental health focus.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Amodei, would you like a rebuttal?
No, ma'am.
All right, so we'll move on to the final question, and Ms. Krause will begin with you. Trying to read this? Okay. Do you agree with some legislator who want to see, excuse me, we've read that one. Will you support legislation to reverse Citizen United in an effort to get dark money out of elections?
Definitely. That's one of the things that it took me a little while to run because that's one of the things I resisted. I was like, why can't it just be that the best candidate is the one that we elect? Why can't we just make sure that we know who all the candidates are and pick the best one? I don't like that money is a factor in who ends up being the leaders of our country, our state, and I don't know how much it happens locally, but, I definitely am in support of anything that gets, especially, it even has the dark money. How could anyone say yes to that? So that's my answer.
And Mr. Amodei?
Me too.
Okay.
Well, I don't want to be, let me just tell you this. As somebody who grew up around here, which doesn't mean that you're a real high-flying financial whatever the heck. Dad was a state employee, classified service state employee. Mom was a bookkeeper in a doctor's office. We grew up in a home that was 1,000 square feet, second subdivision ever in Carson. That's all I'm going to say. It's going to date me. But when you go into this last primary, and I had somebody spend $750,000 telling everybody what a rotten SOB I was. Now, obviously, I disagreed with that, but still, when you're not somebody who goes out there, and the blessing for this district is, it's a relatively cheap media market. So you don't have to go raise $1 million a quarter to run. But you just sit there and you go, so what do you do? Because all the political experts are like, well, they're on TV, you got to get on TV, and you got to chase their buy, and it's like, that provides, in my experience, nothing to the discussion of who you ought to vote for. And the consultants love it because they get a piece of all that action, but me too.
And would you like to provide a rebuttal?
Yes, it came to mind when he mentioned the media. If we could all, as citizens, just make a concerted effort to call out how ridiculous these extreme commercials are and have discussions about them so that they're no longer effective, I think we should do a campaign on that.
I'm with you.
Okay, and we will allow each an opportunity to provide a 1-minute closing statement. And I'm trying to remember who opened. I believe it was Mr. Amodei. So Ms. Krause, we will start with you. You're a minute for closing statement.
Thank you. I believe the best candidates are the candidates who run because their heart has led them there. Leaders in my community recognize the passion and heart I have for Nevada, and I answered the call to run. Voters are smart. We recognize candidates who are there to work for the people, to fix problems we care about, and who actually prioritize making our communities stronger. Elections are the cornerstone of our democracy, and as we move closer to Election Day, I want to remind everyone that early voting begins on October 22nd and runs through November 4th. I also want to take this moment to celebrate that there are 11 new tribal polling locations in addition to the 8 that we had previously existing. This is amazing, and it wouldn't be possible without the efforts of the advocates and the tribal leaders who have been working on this for so long. I'm not a politician. I won't ever pretend to know answers to everything. That I promise I will commit to always seeking the advice of people who have the lived experience on the issues, and those
Thank you, Ms. Krause. Allowed you a little bit over.
Okay,
Mr. Amodei.
Thank you. You know, it's been the privilege of a lifetime, even though I didn't start out to be here, to be able to tell people that I was given the responsibility for representing and advocating for Nevadans back in that place 2,500 miles away. And so, similar to Mercedes, it's like when your heart and soul is in your community and your experiences growing up and raising your kids and all that other sort of stuff, and your focus is, you said you're not a politician, good for you. I like to try not to act like one all the time because I grew up in this town and I sat on the street Nevada Day in front of all the adults behind me. When the politicians would come by, they're going, there goes that rotten SOB now, and blah, 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 and they're waving, smiling, and all that. It really grounds you. And so I want to say thank you for the opportunity to represent you. I will abide by whatever the voters say on the 8th, and I hope we've done well enough for you to want to let us go for 24 more months.
All right, thank you. And at this time, we will allow a 10-minute transition.
May I just also, I didn't get my thank you in. I really appreciate, the league and their sponsors. This is my first debate. It's been a positive experience. Thank you so much.
Mr. Amodei, did you want to share anything?
Well, I'll just say this. She's right on. We've never run a negative ad in our life because I think it turns people off. And so if you can't talk about the issues, I'll join with you in that group where we want to go tell all those guys what those ads did.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so for this next portion, we will be addressing ballot question number 1. I will begin by first reading the question and then introducing the speakers. Ballot question number 1. Shall the Nevada Constitution be amended by adding a specific guarantee that equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the state or any of its cities, counties, or other political subdivisions on account of race, color, creed, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, age, disability, ancestry, or national origin. Now, I'd like to welcome the speakers here. Nettie Stevens, Chair of Equal Rights Nevada, will give pro argument, and Janine Hansen, President of Nevada Families for Freedom, will present the con argument. And did we have an agreement on who would be speaking first? Okay, so we will have Nettie go first this evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here. My name is Nettie Stevens. I'm honored to be the campaign manager for Nevadans for Equal Rights, working to pass question 1. My pronouns are they, them, and if there are anybody who requires visual accommodations, I am a Black, femme-presenting non-binary individual with they, them dangle earrings, a very dark teal lipstick, and wearing a maroon purple button down. I'm here, and I'm incredibly excited to at the opportunity for us to enshrine an equal rights protection clause in our state constitution, because, quite frankly, it's about time. In 1864, this brilliant and beautifully diverse state was born to the Union, and was born during a moment of strife and a battle for the soul of the nation. We were at that point in time a year past the Emancipation Proclamation, but we would not see the end of slavery, the day of Jubilee, for 3 more years, June 19th, 1867. We would not see for another 50-some years the 19th Amendment, which allowed the first subsection of women, white women, the ability to vote. Then, with the Indian Citizenship Act in 1924, the Voting Rights Act in 1965, and the extension in 1975, we finally received that parity with respect to the right to vote. But that's just the right to vote. We also have to make sure that we are providing and enshrining the protections in our state constitution with respect to sex, which is definitely where the national ERA started, but also being more inclusive, more expansive. Making sure we're prohibiting discrimination based off of the protected classes that are within the proposed ballot measure language. And so I'm here to ensure that, again, we are ensuring these protections in our state constitution, making sure that we are being the bastion, that light in the face of conservative attacks and conservative rollbacks of rights across this nation. And so this is a time for all of us to come together, ensure that we are really living up to our duty and our promise to be that equal land, and ensuring that for all Nevadans that our rights are enshrined in the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Nettie. And Janine, you can provide an opening statement and then go ahead and answer the question.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you here this evening. It's always wonderful when we can come together in a forum where we can be friends with one another and discuss issues we may disagree on. My name is Janine Hansen. I'm the state president of Nevada Families for Freedom, but I'm also the state Stop Question 1 chairman. ERA is a radical state constitutional amendment, more radical than any state has ever passed. What it will mean is that it will allow it will allow biological males to participate in female sports and to achieve their scholarships. It allows minor children to receive puberty blockers and gender change surgery without parental knowledge or consent. It forces taxpayers to pay for abortions. It threatens religious liberty without funding the faith-based organizations with traditional views on marriage and gender. It requires schools and colleges and other government-owned facilities to allow males in women's bathrooms, showers, and locker rooms, making the safety and privacy of women and girls, and they are at risk. It could threaten parental rights, and the age of consent laws could be putting children at risk of predators. We do not know the long-term consequences of this constitutional amendment. The Legislative Counsel Bureau wrote arguments that are on the legislative website. They are well documented. They wrote pro-arguments and arguments against it, and these were written by the Legislative Counsel Bureau and then approved by the Legislative Commission. If you want to read those arguments, I highly recommend them, and I have a copy of them here. They're very important in understanding what it will mean. I was part of the discussion in adopting those particular rules and those particular arguments. And it's very important to realize that there are many things about this amendment we do not know. For instance, it will jeopardize religious liberty. They fail to understand in all of this that you can't give rights to some while you will be taking rights away from others. And I'll finish that thought a little later. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. And we will begin with question 1. Nettie, you will be going first, if that's okay. So I'll begin. How does the Nevada ERA amendment tie in with the federal ERA amendment?
So first, thank you so much for that question. This is something that is incredibly important when we're talking about question 1 and really kind of how the state amendment is related to and also ways in which it differs. So for folks, definitely if folks have the background, the national ERA, which was first proposed in 1923, was passed in Congress and signed in the early 70s, but at that point in time did not quite reach the number of states to ratify it to officially become adopted as an amendment. The national ERA is specifically making sure that we are providing in our U.S. Constitution the prohibition of discrimination on the basis of sex. And so as folks can see with respect to the language and the state proposed ERA, it's much more expansive and much more inclusive. I definitely want to make a point in saying that it's important for us to really realize that maybe discomfort and maybe it is uncomfortable with respect to making sure that everybody has those rights, but equality feels like oppression to those who have privilege. And so it's incredibly important for us to recognize that we have to ensure a base level protection for all Nevadans, ensuring that all Nevadans have equal opportunity to succeed in this state. It is incredibly important and one of the core values that we all should be living toward.
Thank you. And Janine, would you like me to repeat the question?
No. What is the time?
You have 2 minutes each.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And then we will also allow 1 minute rebuttal.
The federal ERA was not only defeated in Nevada's legislature, but it was defeated on the ballot by 68% of Nevada voters when it came up. There's a huge difference between that original ERA and what is proposed now. And that difference is that the only thing that was mentioned in the original ERA was the word sex. But in this one, we have added sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, and age. And those broaden this way beyond what the original federal ERA would have been. And that's considerable concern. One of the things the Legislative Counsel Bureau put in their argument was that this question of age, because this will be left up to the courts to decide what it means. They said, the measure contains no provision to guide courts in resolving conflicts among those provided of all these classifications. For instance, there is no way to know how courts would resolve challenges to existing age-based laws regarding sexual consent, child endangerment, parental consent, and notification, some of which involve classifications based on both age and sex. We are very concerned that this will damage age of consent laws. Do we want 16-year-old girls having the right to be working in brothels in Nevada? Do we want age of consent laws eliminated, possibly in the courts by challenge through people that are interested in making our children at risk for predators? This could actually happen because they have age in this particular constitutional amendment proposal. I think it's very important to consider the far-reaching consequences, which we don't really know what's going to happen because they will ultimately be resolved not by you, not by your vote in November, but by the courts, which you will have little or nothing to say about.
Thank you, Janine. And Nettie, would you like an opportunity to rebuttal?
Yes. I think it's incredibly important for us to point out the different fallacies that we just heard in the last 2 minutes here. With respect to the age of consent, there is very, very clear within our national laws, the Age Discrimination in the Workplace Act, which ensures that we are protecting particularly older folks in the workplace, making sure that they're not being discriminated based off of their age. And so that is why it's important to ensure that, again, we are protecting and creating that base level protection within our state constitution as well. I think that definitely to the point of, or I guess the allegation that the ERA is concerning, I think for me the most concerning part is that it took so long to provide and propose an ERA amendment that was so inclusive, to make sure that we're protecting all of our rights. I know that to the point of the ERA, the national one not being ratified by the original deadline, but it was brought back here in Nevada and it was passed here in Nevada, the state ERA, the national ERA, and then following the state ERA. And so I just want to make sure that it's very, very clear that the facts of the record here.
Thank you. We will be moving on to the next question, and Janine, we will begin with you. 2 minutes. What is the purpose and need of a constitutional amendment when we have the ability to address the issues with statutes and regulations?
There is no reason. We have federal law and state law, extensive, and court rulings that protect equal rights and equality of rights. And they cover all of these issues without creating the tremendous complications that this particular undefined ERA will create in the state of Nevada. For instance, the Legislative Counsel Bureau wrote and approved by the Legislative Commission, question 1 may be used by biological males and transgender athletes as a basis to undermine women's sports by demanding equal rights that allow them to compete unfairly against women and girls in sports and athletic scholarships. This essentially erases women and girls and often parents' rights. Question 1, going on with the Legislative Counsel Bureau, may also be used to challenge the traditional separation of men's and women's restrooms and locker rooms and government-owned facilities such as public schools, universities, and colleges, allowing biological men and women in each other's restrooms and locker rooms and threatening everyone's personal safety and privacy. We've seen this happening around the country. I have 17 grandchildren. I am very concerned about their safety wherever they might be, and I think this is of considerable concern to parents of all sorts. Whatever political party they might be, they're concerned about the safety of their children. And this particular radical state amendment jeopardizes children in particular, and girls even more so. And I'm very, very concerned about that, and we need to recognize that these are threats, and they will be decided not by you, but by the courts. And that's a very important issue to remember, that the courts will be the final arbiter of what that means. I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of faith in the courts.
Thank you, Janine. And Nettie, if you'd like me to repeat the question, I can. Otherwise, you're up.
No, I can continue. And I definitely do want to say on that last point with respect to not having faith in the courts. I know that my right to exist here in front of you all was decided by our court system. As somebody who is black, as somebody who's part of the LGBTQ plus community, a lot of my rights, initially were passed in law, but ensuring that those rights stayed and maintained, and that I even have the ability before you all as the eldest of Nigerian immigrants to even talk about this issue is something that has been critical in terms of ensuring that we have those level of protections there. And so it's definitely good that we have these protections in state law, but it is not enough. We need to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to protect equality of rights. I do want to say, especially to the and I'll be honest, I'll be frank about it, the fear-mongering with respect to trans individuals. This is incredibly offensive. And I'll say that definitely as somebody who's part of the community, LGBTQ plus community, but also just as somebody who has a background in STEM. One of my degrees, and I know I'm here in the political space, but I have a degree in chemical engineering with a biomedical emphasis. And so when I hear folks who are talking about quote unquote biological males, they are using, quite frankly, a third grade misunderstanding of basic biology in order to scare people into doing the wrong thing. But I know the Nevadans, and I trust that Nevadans can see through that and understand that we need to be protecting everybody.
Thank you. And Janine, would you like an opportunity for rebuttal?
Yes, I would. I don't think there's any place here for name-calling or accusing people of fear-mongering. We're just simply talking about the facts that were approved by the Legislative Council, which was 50% Republicans, 50% Democrats. They said in their statement, Kevin Powers, the head of the Legislative Council Bureau, that these were very reasonable concerns which they were presenting in the ballot. And so I don't think there's any reason for name-calling at all. One of my biggest concerns is that of freedom of religion. When I testified about this at the state legislature, the sponsor of the bill told me we didn't need to worry about putting freedom of religion in the bill. And I said I was significantly concerned about that because there are rights that are juxtaposed in this issue. Some that will undermine the right of an individual person and their religion to be able to practice it if they have traditional views. If they have traditional views on sex, on marriage, and on family. So this concerns me, and that is confirmed in what the Legislative Council Bureau wrote in their argument.
Thank you. We will be moving on to the next question, and we will begin back with you, Janine. The original ERA dealt with sex. Why does the current measure expand the rights so dramatically so that opponents can attack it? And these are questions from the audience. I just want to remind everyone.
Am I supposed to answer that?
Yes.
I thought it was her turn.
Oh,
I'm
no,
sorry.
it's yours. I can repeat it if you would like.
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
The original ERA dealt with sex. Why does the current measure expand the rights so dramatically so that opponents can attack it?
That's exactly right. The original ERA, the federal ERA, which was defeated in Nevada 3 times by the legislature and then by the people on the ballot when it was first adopted, when it was first put forth to the people, only contained the word sex. And even in that, there were many issues which we had. For instance, we were concerned even then that it would mean bathrooms that would not be protected singularly for women or for men. It also meant that women might be drafted. We were concerned about that. We were concerned about how it would affect the issue of abortion. And of course, this one in Nevada will ensure, just like in New Mexico and in Connecticut, under their state ERAs, that we will have tax-funded abortions. And whether or not you're in favor of abortion, we have pretty clear laws, as Congressman Amodei said in Nevada, that we have a law that allows abortion up till the second trimester. But I don't know about you, but I don't want to pay for somebody else's abortion. And I don't think the taxpayers want to do that. So that's a huge concern in all of this as well. That's part of this whole argument. And the federal ERA was limited, but this one expands it. As I said before, it includes sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, and age. And that particularly is an issue with many of these things that I brought up. For instance, freedom of religion. And for me, that's an incredibly important issue because I want to be able to practice my religion freely. We don't want people that have shops who don't want to serve people and make, say, for instance, a wedding cake for transgenders, that they should be forced into doing that. People that have religious convictions should have their rights protected under the First Amendment and under the Nevada Constitution just as well as anybody else. But this particular constitutional amendment puts that in jeopardy.
Thank you. Nettie, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
The original ERA dealt with sex. Why does the current measure expand the rights so dramatically so that opponents can attack it?
So I think this is a really, really important question, and again, it speaks to our values as Nevadans. Do we want to ensure that folks have equal opportunity to succeed in this state? Do we want to ensure that at a very, very base level, we are providing for protection for equal rights? And for myself and my side of the table here, the answer to that is yes. And so with respect to the difference of the national ERA and the state ERA, we've definitely gotten to a point, especially since the point in which the state ERA, the national ERA was initially introduced to now in our understanding of what it actually means to protect equal rights, ensuring that we're protecting folks, again, based on the various different protected classes that are outlined in the state proposed ERA amendment, that are also protections that are guaranteed in the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. And so it's important, again, to the point that to state laws, ensuring that those protections are there, but also adding that extra layer of security for a lot of individuals across the state. And so I definitely want to really underscore the importance of ensuring that we are protecting those rights. And I do want to add an additional point, especially when we're talking about freedom of religion. I mean, I come from an incredibly religious family, and that, I mean, definitely speaks to the way in which religion functions, especially in a lot of, whether it be African diaspora families or other immigrant families. Religion being that space where no matter how hard things get, like there is that light at the end of the tunnel. And so it's incredibly important, especially when we're talking about religion, that like, yes, we want to ensure that folks like have the ability to practice the religion that feels best to them, that they are raised in, or otherwise that they practice. And that is completely separate and a different conversation from the ability to ensure that everybody has equal rights. Again, I wish that I had I know my time is up here, but I do want to. Thank you.
Janine, would you like an opportunity for rebuttal?
Yes.
Okay.
The Alliance Defending Freedom, which focuses all of their work on defending religious liberty in the United States, made this statement when SJR 8, which is now question 1, was in the legislature. It harms medical rights of conscience and taxpayer funding for abortion help for professionals who take an oath to do no harm, and yet many doctors, counselors, and healthcare practitioners believe that prescribing puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and bodily cosmetic surgery to otherwise healthy children who are struggling with their gender identity causes grave and often irreversible harm. Under question 1, these healthcare professionals would be forced to either violate their oath to care for their patients in accordance with their best medical judgment or leave the medical profession entirely. That's what I'm talking about, people being allowed the right to practice their religion. We need to allow all people the right of their conscience. If people choose a certain way to live, that's fine, as long as they aren't imposing that on others, and that's a huge problem.
Thank you. Okay, we'll conclude with one more question, and I'm trying to remember who went last. I believe you're up, Nettie. So the question is, how many other states have similar ERA provisions in their constitutions?
So that's a really good question. And I believe there are 27 other states who already have those protections codified in their state constitution. Actually, our neighbors to the East Utah, it was actually part of their original draft of their constitution. So they've had an equal rights amendment on the books there since 1896. So Nevada is one of the handful of states in this election cycle that is working to fix an oversight that happened in 1864 in terms of not ensuring that we had the protection for the equality of rights. And so we are one of the states who are looking to definitely provide those protections and ensuring that the folks have that extra layer of security. I do want to say especially to considerations on healthcare, considerations on abortion. I mean, it's very, very clear abortion is healthcare, and I definitely want to make sure that point is clear. But it's also a space where we're talking about equal rights. We're talking about ensuring that, to the opposition's point, that you can go into a restaurant and not be discriminated against because, like, you happen to be Latina, because you happen to be queer, because you happen to be of a different background. Making sure that we are enshrining our Constitution the illegality of discriminating against older folks in the workplace, and ensuring that we have these protections on the books. And so it's incredibly important that we keep in mind that this is about equal rights. This is about adding that extra layer of protection, and quite frankly, this is a baseline to ensuring that all Nevadans have equal opportunity to succeed and to thrive here in the state. I do want to also make sure that to the point of taxpayer funding abortion, so forth, those are things that just quite frankly are not true. They're not part of the proposed amendment, and it's incredibly important for us to be very, very clear on what the facts of the matter are.
Thank you. And Janine, please let me know if you'd like me to repeat.
Yes.
How many other states have similar ERA provisions in their constitutions?
No other state has such a radical ERA as proposed here. They may have state equal rights amendments, but they don't have any of these things that include sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression and age. We also have many federal and state laws that protect these things, including the issues that are also in here of race, color, and creed, disability, and national origin. It's very important for us to realize that this is a constitutional amendment, and it's very difficult to change once we don't like the unintended consequences. The Legislative Counsel Bureau said that it will have inevitably unintended consequences and a flood of litigation, and enshrining this broad language into our Constitution. So how long does it take to change a constitutional amendment? A minimum of 5 years. That's if you start right away. So if there are court decisions that we don't like, that impact the age of consent, or that impact our girls in sports, or that impact tax funding for abortions, like has happened under the ERAs in New Mexico and Connecticut, if we don't like those things, we won't be able to even begin changing them without the process of a constitutional amendment, which takes 5 years. Because there's two ways to have a constitutional amendment. One is that the legislature passes it twice, so that's 2 legislative sessions, and then it goes on the ballot. That's what's happened with this one. There were almost no hearings. In fact, they had no hearings in the Assembly on this, and limited hearings because of COVID in the Senate, only on Zoom. And so it'll take 5 years to change this. If the people do an initiative to try to overturn it, that takes $1 million to do an initiative minimum. So we don't know what the consequences are going to be, but we have a pretty good idea as outlined by the Legislative Counsel Bureau. This is the most radical ERA in the whole nation. There's nobody that has one like this, and it will be dangerous to women, girls, and parents.
Thank you. And Nettie, would you like an opportunity for rebuttal?
I would, yes, and this definitely goes to again the language within the state proposed ERA amendment. It's incredibly important again that we are protecting equal rights for everyone. Period. And so with the understanding that collectively we've gained over the years, which again, it is about time that we ensure that we protect these rights in our state constitution. It's incredibly important to ensure that we here in Nevada have the opportunity to tell the rest of the country that yes, we want to ensure that all Nevadans here have equal rights and equal opportunity to succeed. I think to the point about unintended consequences, for my parents who are small business owners, if they are required to serve somebody with a disability, or if they are required to serve somebody of a different national origin, that is not an unintended consequence. That's a celebration of the diversity of this amazing state. And so I definitely want to make very, very clear that this is an opportunity for us to do and to ensure that the protection for equality of rights that we did not include in 1864, that we get to include here in 2022.
Thank you. And at this time, we'll allow an opportunity for closing statements. Nettie, since you started, we'll start with you, Janine, for your closing statement, and go to Nettie.
I think it works the other way around.
Okay, so then Nettie, would you like to provide your closing?
Sure.
Is that okay? I'm trying to remember. I try to keep track. Okay.
No worries.
Trying to be fair.
Hopefully, no, I appreciate that. And so I do want to say, first, thank you so much to the League of Women Voters. Thank you so much for everybody who is here in this space and is tuning in online. This is an amazing opportunity, again, for us to ensure that we are fixing a patch in our state constitution that was left in 1864. I sit before you as a product of the amazing diversity of the state. My parents came to this country with a dream of building a better life for me and my siblings, and the ability for them to do so, and the ability of other families to be able to ensure the higher quality of life is absolutely fundamental and has to be included and represented in our state constitution. And so I have the honor and the privilege of being able to talk to a lot of different individuals about what the ERA means to them in terms of pay equity, in terms of reproductive freedom, in terms of ensuring that, again, we're protecting everybody and really meeting them where they are. And so with that, it's been a pleasure to be here and to talk about this important issue.
Thank you. Janine, this time I'm sure you're up.
Thank you. It's been great to be with you. It's wonderful to discuss these issues. We need to hear all sides. It's important in our nation to allow for political debate so that we can maintain liberty and freedom of speech. Those are critical issues to keep alive in America. And once we don't do that anymore, our liberties are lost. One of the things that the Legislative Council Bureau said was that Question 8 will put individual liberties and safety at risk. We're significantly concerned about the safety of our children. We're concerned about the rights that will be taken away from young women and in sports. We're worried about our religious liberties. We're concerned about the safety of our children because of the issue of age. We are concerned that about all of these things which will not be decided until the courts make the ultimate decision. If you're concerned about the dangerous and harmful nature of Question 8, of Question 1, vote no.
Thank you. And at this time, we will transition to ballot question 2. So we're going to allow a brief pause to allow these folks, thank them, and allow the transition off stage. I appreciate your time. Thank you. Hello? All right, thank you. We are back, and at this time we will be addressing ballot question number 2. I will begin by first reading the question and then allowing the two speakers to provide an opening statement. Shall the Nevada Constitution be amended effective July 1, 2024 to 1, establish the state's minimum wage that employers must pay to certain employees at a rate of $12 per hour worked, subject to any applicable increases above the $12 rate provided by federal law or enacted by the Nevada legislature. 2, remove the existing provisions setting different rates for the minimum wage based on whether the employer offers certain health benefits to such employees. And 3, remove the existing provisions for adjusting the minimum wage based on applicable increases to the cost of living. I'd like to welcome Christine Saunders, Policy Director, Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada. She will be providing the pro argument. And welcome back Janine Hansen, President of Nevada Families for Freedom. She will be providing the con argument. And did we agree on who would be opening first? Janine, will you please provide your opening statement? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here again. Can you hear me? Yes. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm not an expert on this issue. I testified at the legislature on it, and I guess that's why they asked me. But I've done some research, and I did testify in opposition to it there, and I have some serious concern. One is this doesn't belong in the Constitution. You know, right now we have a statute which will require by 2024 that the minimum wage be $12. And so we can do it by statute. We don't have to put it in the Constitution, which has limitations. One of the things this constitutional amendment does is that it removes the provision that's in the previous constitutional amendment, is that if people can pay, employers can pay $1 less if they provide adequate health insurance for those that work for them. And so it takes away that incentive for employers to provide health insurance for their employees, which I think is very significant. There was a lot of discussion about this minimum wage issue last year in the Congress, and one of the things that was said was that a third of small businesses would say they're going to let people go. Now, what's the purpose of a minimum wage? We want to help teenagers, we want to help minorities, we want to help low-skilled workers, but all the empirical evidence shows that it ends up harming those people. It doesn't improve the poverty rate, and it doesn't give them a living wage. And so what it does is take away opportunities for teenagers. It takes away opportunities for low-skilled workers because they don't want to pay more for a low-skilled worker if they can pay for a higher-skilled worker, and it hurts minorities. I thought one of the most interesting things that I read about it was from his autobiography from Walter Williams, who was an economist. Up from the Projects, the late economist Walter Williams explained his move away from minimum wage. He found that minimum wage laws were particularly detrimental to black people. He summed it up when he wrote, and then he talks about that it
Janine,
hurts
thank
them
you.
the most. We'll go on next.
All right. Ms. Saunders, you are up.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm also glad to be here supporting question 2. And to understand this measure, we do need to jump back a few years to 2019. In 2019, the Nevada legislature passed Assembly Bill 456, which raises the minimum wage in 75-cent increments each year until it reaches $12 an hour if the employer does not offer health insurance, and $11 an hour if the employer does offer health insurance in 2024. Alongside Assembly Bill 456 was Assembly Joint Resolution 10, which passed during the 2019 and 2021 legislative sessions and is what is now before you as Question 2. Question 2 does 3 things. It sets the minimum wage listed in the Constitution to be in alignment with what was passed in Assembly Bill 456. It removes the healthcare carve-out, which has allowed employers to pay $1 less if they offered health insurance, regardless of the quality of that health insurance, and clarifies that the legislature has the authority to continue raising the minimum wage. I do want to be clear that the minimum wage has already gone up and will continue to go up because of Assembly Bill 456. This measure will, however, have a big impact on the Nevadans who are paid the lower tier minimum wage. Businesses have taken advantage of the 2-tier minimum wage system by offering terrible and expensive healthcare plans that often go unutilized, thus permitting them to pay employees the lower tier. It is also important to clarify that it is the legislature's role to monitor and increase the minimum wage in the state. Prior to action in 2019, Nevada's minimum wage had not gone up since 2010, when it was required to increase to $7.25 with the federal minimum wage. By passing Question 2, we are removing this health insurance exemption, closing a loophole that businesses have taken advantage of, and ensuring that we can hold our elected officials accountable to raise the minimum wage.
Thank you. And Janine, would you like an opportunity for rebuttal?
Yes, I think it's very important to
Excuse me, that was opening statements. I apologize. Excuse me.
Just turn me on and I'll start.
Well, thank you for your patience. I will now ask question 1. And Christine, we will begin with you. When did Nevada first adopt a minimum wage in the state constitution?
I do not know the exact date for the first one, but the most recent updates were 2006. So in 2004 and 2006, we raised the minimum wage in the Constitution, and that is where we set the healthcare carve-out to pay $1 less if you offered health insurance. That also does include a portion to have the minimum wage increase by CPI. Unfortunately, that has never been effective, and the minimum wage never increased without the legislature taking action since 2010.
And Janine?
The legislature did pass a constitutional amendment, which was in 2006, was the first one in our Nevada Constitution, I believe, on minimum wage. And, but it's not necessary to have it in the Constitution because the legislature, just as they did this last session, are able to pass laws regarding minimum wage. I think it's important to realize that these can be in conflict with other means of helping people who are low income. For instance, if minimum wage workers do not lose their job, this is from James Schreck, who testified before U.S. Congress. If minimum wage workers do not lose their jobs, the overlapping, uncoordinated design of U.S. welfare programs prevent those in need from benefiting from higher wages. As their income rises, they lose federal tax credits and assistance. These benefit losses offset most of the wage increases. A single mother with 1 child faces an effective marginal tax rate of 91% when her pay rises from 7.25 cents an hour to $10.10 an hour. Studies also find higher minimum wages do not reduce poverty rates. And so we don't know the interplay of all of these things together, that the minimum wage will not help many of these lower paid and lower skilled workers. One of the things they found that was much more effective was that a majority surveyed economists showed that 71% believe that the earned income tax is a very efficient way to address income needs of poor families, and only 5% believe that a minimum wage would be as efficient.
Thank you. And Christine, would you like an opportunity for rebuttal?
Yeah. Minimum wage workers and low wage workers are generally mostly adults and disproportionately women and Black and Latinx men. Due to structural racism and sexism, women, Black and Latinx men would see major gains with raising the minimum wage and reducing the racial and gender wage gaps. And it's also no surprise that the states with highest poverty rates are also among those who have not yet independently increased their minimum wage above the federal floor. There are also a number of other benefits to raising the minimum wage, which include that the National Institute of Health estimates that an additional $4,000 a year for poorest households means an additional year of education for children. And the Center for Budget Policy and Priorities reports that for each $1,000 increase in annual income over 2 to 5 years, children's school performance improves. I also want to say, I think if your business model requires you to pay your full-time employees so little that they rely on taxpayer-funded Medicaid and food stamps and other tax credits, that it's time to get a new business model.
Thank you, Christine. And due to time, we will have one more question for you both to answer. How will the outcome of the vote on ballot question 2 impact the amendment? And we will start with you.
Say that again.
Sure. How will the outcome of the vote on ballot question 2 impact the amendment?
I don't understand that question.
The statute?
Well, I can go on to, let's move on to a separate question. These are not my questions.
The answer is if it passes, it becomes part of the Constitution.
Okay.
So that's the answer.
So would you like a response to that, Ms. Saunders, or we can move on as well?
I think we can move on.
Okay, great. The final question for this evening: how does Nevada's amendment on minimum wage compare to other states?
Am I first?
Actually, Christine is first.
Okay. Yeah. Nevada is very rare in being a state that has the minimum wage in the Constitution, and I do actually agree with Janine. I think there are a lot of things that Nevada has put in the Constitution that don't make sense there. But I think the point of this ballot question 2 is to really just clarify that this is the last time we need to update the Constitution. This will make sure that we have one minimum wage in the state, not a two-tiered system, and ensure that our legislature continues to have the authority to increase the minimum wage moving forward, and which also allows us as the community, the constituents, to hold our legislators accountable to raise the minimum wage going forward.
All right, thank you, and Christine. And Janine.
Would you repeat the question?
Sure. How does Nevada's amendment on minimum wage compare to other states?
I don't really know. I haven't compared this with other states, but one thing we know is that this won't make any difference because the legislature has already brought the minimum wage up to, just in recent legislation for 2024 to $12 an hour. Now, why is this meaningless? Well, wages should be set by the market, and right now they are. You can get a job at McDonald's for $18 an hour. Why? Because they need people, so the wages have gone up. And this won't keep up with anything, with inflation that's being caused by the money printing that's going on in our nation right now. This $12 minimum wage isn't going to mean anything because people are having to pay more for gas, they're having to pay more for food, and it isn't even going to be reasonable. So letting the market set, as they always have in the past, allow them to set minimum wage is far more reasonable. Everywhere you go, they have help wanted signs. Have you noticed that? They can't get people to work. The minimum wage is not going to help people in the long run because it's going to be outpaced by inflation in our nation. What we need is wages set by the marketplace that will allow employers to make that decision so that they don't go out of business. What happened in Seattle when they raised the minimum wage? That was many businesses closed in Seattle and simply moved out because they couldn't afford to pay the large minimum wage that they had up there, which was at that time $13 going to $15 an hour in Seattle. So we need not to pass this constitutional amendment. The legislature already has the power to raise the minimum wage, and it wouldn't take 5 years, if we don't like what it says, to change it back. So it's not reasonable, and it isn't needed because it's already taken care of by the state legislature. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Christine, would you like an opportunity for rebuttal?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
A 2018 Berkeley study of 6 cities, including Seattle, when they implemented their higher minimum wage, showed that their wages, there was stronger private sector growth than the average comparison counties around them, and that there was no significant negative employment outcomes. So that's a study from Berkeley in 2018.
Thank you. And that's all the questions we have for tonight, but I would like to thank you both for being here and participating. The forums would not be possible without the generosity of our co-sponsors, the Nevada Appeal and the Brewery Arts Center. The Nevada Appeal will post video of all the forums on the Nevada Appeal YouTube website. YouTube provides viewers with options for closed captioning and translation. And I'd like to just give an announcement regarding the next 3 forums scheduled. October 10th, Carson City School District Trustees, District 1 and 6. Carson City Board of Supervisors, Wards 1 and 3. On October 11th, Senate District 16 and Assembly District 40 and 39. And on October 17th, ballot question 3, ranked choice and open primary. And as we also have the Secretary of State candidates and Carson City Clerk Recorder. Thank you. And finally, we want to give a special thanks to the student volunteers. They were here participating. And then, of course, thanks to the candidates who participated. All right, have a wonderful evening.